Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into why Web3 is such a game changer and my personal journey in building a decentralized e-commerce platform. So let's get started. So in our current Web2 world, we really rely heavily on third-party platforms like Google, Facebook, banks, and insurance companies, telecommunications companies, you name it. All of these large corporations, they store our personal and financial data, leaving us vulnerable to data breaches and misuse. Worse than this is that these platforms take a percentage of every single transaction made on their systems, meaning that the value accrues to them first and foremost, not to you and I, the end user. This centralized system limits control over our assets, making us dependent on the rules and permissions of these platforms. We've all heard the stories of these centralized platforms that shut down person X, Y, or Z. There are many recent stories of these platforms doing this. They shall remain nameless. I'm not going to name and shame them, but you know who they are if you've been in this space. So Web3 changes the game. It removes the middlemen, i.e. these third-party incumbents, and you fully own your digital assets and wallet accounts. This means that you can transfer value, whether it's currency or NFTs or digital tokens like art and real estate, or even a tokenized insurance contract, directly to others without the need for a third party to be involved. And as I was saying, I think the future is this. In the not too distant future, all of the contracts that govern our lives, our daily lives, if you think about it, we have contracts with the gas company, with the water company, the electricity company, the internet company, the mobile phone company. So, you see it, right? So we have contracts with all of these third parties. Why can't these contracts be smart contracts? Code that is transparent, verifiable, that doesn't make any distinction whether it's running for you or for me. It doesn't care. It just basically applies the rules transparently, equally to everyone. This is a fairer system than the current system that we have today. So yeah, so these points basically just reiterate what I was just talking about. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of Web3 and my own personal challenge that I decided to take. So there are, I'm not going to spend too long on this, but I just wanted to show you or talk through two primary use cases that Web3, and again, as I keep saying the word Web3, Web3 is just basically shorter than just saying decentralized technology. So just remember that whenever I say Web3, I talk about decentralized applications in effect. So one powerful example, of course, is e-commerce. So with Web3, businesses can offer near zero transaction fees and instant settlement. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of choose this use case for my own business. But also, this is the same application that I wrote for my business. I'm going to share that, like the highlights of writing that application and some of the pieces of the code that I find are relevant for you if you're trying to do the same for your own applications. And, as I was saying, using the Web3 Rails for payments, for example, it just basically removes much of that complexity that traditional applications face today, streamlining the whole process for businesses, sort of selling products and services to customers, but on Web3 Rails as opposed to using Web2 Rails. Another use case is remittances. So international remittances are one of the fundamental use cases that a lot of people around the world, especially in countries where they are unbanked, because I didn't mention this up until now, but it's obvious that one of the key roles of crypto in general, Bitcoin in particular, is to bank the unbanked. It's very easy for people that don't have access to traditional banking system, either because their country doesn't allow them or because they don't really have the means to access those services. It's very easy for those people to basically, if they have a smartphone and an internet connection, they basically immediately have a wallet with a balance, and it's incredibly powerful that. But as I was saying, I mean, in some blockchains like Solana, for example, the transaction fees are just pennies, and it doesn't matter the amount being transferred, whether it's $10 or $10 million, the fees remain minimal. They're the same, and if you think about it, in the traditional world, this whole fees remain the same is kind of unthinkable. The fees are often a percentage of the transaction, and that's just the way it is. You've all probably experienced this as I have when I send money abroad to another country. It often costs me dozens, if not hundreds, of euros or pounds or dollars, whatever the currency might be, but effectively it's expensive. You know that, you've probably experienced the same. So in terms of the challenge that I decided to take on, and this basically was just my realization that Web3's potential is extremely high. And I decided, as I said, to build a decentralized application for my business. So and I'll talk about that business in maybe some upcoming videos. But for now, suffice to say that the goal was to create that e-commerce platform, as I keep saying, that could take advantage of all the benefits that I described. That the no middleman, the instant transactions, near zero fees, all of those things. And of course, building this decentralized application came with its own set of challenges, especially as a full stack developer, because I had to think about not just the newness of developing a smart contract in Solana, which I never had done before. So that was a first. But then using the front-end technology, which in this case was Dart Flutter, to integrate with things like the Phantom wallet. Never had done that before. I didn't know how hard that was going to be, especially when you're thinking about integrating with Phantom on the web versus on the mobile app, and you want to do it seamlessly in the same code base. It's not quite possible to do it in the same code base, but almost like at least 90% code sharing is possible. And I will show you that. So in going through this experience, I gained a really deep understanding of the tools, the languages, and processes required for a successful decentralized application to be built and delivered. And here's what I used to get you started on your journey. So for development environment, Solana CLI. So obviously, this is an essential tool for setting up a local test validator, allowing me basically to point my development environment to localhost, devnet, testnet, mainnet clusters. So obviously, you'll see me doing this, examples of this in my upcoming videos. Quite clearly, I'm going to spend most of my time on devnet. That's the one that you guys are probably going to do the same in your own development time. There is a number of reasons for this. Again, I'm not going to go into the detail for this right now. Of course, localhost is good enough to do some testing. Initially, I was using actually a local cluster because obviously the Solana CLI makes it so easy to launch a local test validator. But if you want to, for example, use the Phantom wallet, it becomes difficult to do that. So I had to really switch to the DevNet cluster. But in the code, I'll show you how I dealt with this. In the code, I set it up in such a way that it's easy for me to just, with one change of one constant in one place, I can just easily repoint the whole application to work with one cluster or another. So I highly recommend basically that you do that as well in your future development. Again, I'll show that in some of my upcoming videos. Next, I use the Rust and Anchor framework. So Solana recommends Rust for program development, and that's what I used. So that is aligned. So obviously I installed the Rust compiler and I added the Anchor framework to speed up the development. So the Anchor CLI is obviously a crucial tool that simplifies many of the tasks, even though I was using a lot of that Anchor CLI initially, but because the deployment started giving me some issues, which I'll explain in a minute, I decided to kind of start using more the Solana playground. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll talk about that in a few seconds. Flutter-Dart. So this is one of the main divergencies comparing what I did with what the Solana Foundation or team, whatever you want to call it, kind of recommend for a development environment. So for the client side, as I said, I chose Flutter-Dart to build a cross-platform application that runs on iOS, Android, and web with code sharing over 90% at least. This decision was different, obviously, from what they recommend of React Native or Next.js or something like that, but I wanted to push the boundaries of what was possible. So this choice obviously presented unique challenges. I'm not going to deny that, because there are very few examples of how we can use Dart with Solana development libraries, especially when it comes to transaction encoding. And this was one of the main sources of problems that I experienced when developing this application, was that if the encoding is off just by 1 byte, the whole thing is not going to work. And it's extremely hard sometimes to figure out exactly where the issue is, even if you know it's the encoding. And often I suspected it was the encoding, but knowing exactly whether it's the arguments that I'm passing into the instruction or whether it's the accounts that are misconfigured in some way. Anyway, going into too much detail right now. Again, these are things that I have on my notes, and I will share those with you and how I overcame. I'll explain exactly how I overcame some of those problems. But yeah, so if you choose one of the JavaScript sort of frameworks to develop your client-side code, your life will be much, much easier. You won't probably experience the same level of issues and trouble that I went through just because I chose Flutter, but you know, it wouldn't be as much fun, I guess, because in the end, I ended up with an application that runs everywhere, except desktop, because desktop, we don't have Phantom Wallet kind of as an app, let's say on Mac. So it's only on the browser. Anyway, maybe one day there will be a Phantom Wallet also on the desktop, although I could trigger it to run on a anyway. Again, too much detail. So yeah, so the next one is the Solana Playground and the Android emulator. So this, of course, these tools are critical for streamlining the development and testing process. The Playground automates the dev test refactor cycle. And it really, really saved me a huge amount of effort and trouble with deployments. I cannot stress how fundamentally important the Playground is. At least it was for me, because the deployment became just piece of cake, click button, fast, kind of relatively fast. And I didn't have to worry about, because initially I was using the CLI to do this. And with the CLI, you can trigger the deployment starts, and then halfway through it breaks down, it doesn't complete. But it gives you some instructions, at least it's helpful enough that it gives you some instructions on potentially how you can resume. And for someone that is a beginner, that is trying to understand how the whole thing works, this is something that you really don't need. Had I known in the beginning, I would have probably done straight away in the playground. But I only really started with using the playground like a few days after I actually started this development work. So, but once I started using it, I never looked back, and it's really, really simple. And when, I suspect that what happens behind the scenes is that the playground actually, even if the deployment breaks, it kind of automatically resumes it. So that saves a lot of trouble, and I'm eternally grateful to the person who actually developed that tool. It's fantastic. I'm sure you'll agree with me when you start using it. I also use the Android emulator. So the reason I say specifically Android emulator and not iOS emulator, I had both. So I could use either iOS or Android, or I could even use the physical phone. So I could run the app straight on the phone. So in my case, I had an Android emulator already installed on my Mac from other projects, and that Android emulator already had the Google Play Store there. So for me, it was quite easy to just effectively install the Phantom wallet in the emulator itself, and to my surprise, it actually worked. I was like thinking it's probably not going to be that easy, but actually it was that easy. I installed the Phantom wallet there, and it worked perfectly. In iOS, I couldn't do that because the iOS emulator didn't have, I believe it didn't have the Apple App Store. I think it was that. But I could test on and I did test on my iOS phone, but like the physical phone, not the emulator. So with the physical phone, yes, absolutely. You can, it's the same as my Android emulator with the Google Play Store. And so this was one. And finally, Shadow Drive. So Shadow Drive, in case you guys are not familiar, is a decentralized protocol for file hosting. This allowed me to keep the DApp free from centralized components. So this was one of the goals that I was, as a geek, I was trying to basically say, no, I'm going to try as much as possible to stay away from any centralized components. I want, as a proof of concept, I want to try and develop this whole entire application, this e-commerce platform, truly free of centralized components. And I think I did it. I'll tell you some of the things that I had to do in order to completely avoid centralized components. I think I did avoid all of them, but anyway, because I've not finished 100% the application, I may need to use some centralized components afterwards, but so far so good. I've not used any of them. So Shadow Drive is sort of a decentralized protocol for file hosting. It's very, very native to Solana, but I could have used some other Filecoin remains one that I could have used, but that's more for the Ethereum ecosystem. Although I may be able to use it from, my application, I don't know. But the point is, Shadow Drive worked great. So that's one of the key components that I use. And again, I'll tell you what I can and cannot do from the app, because the app, because of the security considerations, I decided not to do certain things with Shadow Drive from the app itself. But again, I'm going into too much detail. I do have a tendency for that, but I will talk about that in upcoming videos. Solana Explorer is the last one that I have here on my list. It's basically the block explorer from Solana. And it's obviously a vital tool for verifying transactions on chain. you'll see it throughout the demo sort of codes, the code that I'm going to be showing in the upcoming videos. So looking ahead, and by the way, I hope I don't forget to do this consistently in the upcoming videos, but I'm going to try and give you a preview of what's coming next in my next sessions. At the end of each video, I'm going to try and do this so that you know what's coming and you can keep your eyes peeled for the next video that I'm going to upload. So in the next video, we'll dive even deeper into core concepts that you need to master to build and operate within this Web3 world. These things include topics like key pairs and public and private key cryptography, how wallets, crypto wallets work, and in the Solana space, you have accounts and transactions and instructions. And, even though a lot of these concepts are Solana specific, because, in Solana, everything is an account, and you will get to see that soon enough. But the point is, a lot of these skills that you acquire while going through this are transferable to other blockchains if you decide to develop decentralized applications in other blockchains, because the concepts and paradigms are kind of similar, and maybe the terminology is slightly different. So for instance, in Solana world, it's we call smart contracts programs, but it's kind of the same thing. It's an equivalent concept. So in learning these things, once you take those skills and that knowledge and transfer it to some other project in some other blockchain, maybe in a Bitcoin layer 2 when it finally arrives, because I'm very excited for that, because I would love to do all of this, this application in a Bitcoin layer 2, as I mentioned in my previous video. And the moment I get that chance, I will do it without even thinking about it. And it will be fun actually to do videos comparing this experience that I'm gonna describe to you guys and share with you over the coming videos of developing against Solana and then developing against the Bitcoin layer 2 and the key pros and cons, and that will be fantastic to do videos like that. So I'm expect those videos if I do choose a platform to do that on Bitcoin. Actually, if any of you guys know a Bitcoin in L2 that I should start actually trying to do this on, please drop a comment on the comment section below, and I will reply and definitely consider all of your suggestions. So that's it. I don't want to keep this video too long. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe, hit the like button, and ring the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my future content. And stay empowered, stay decentralized. Thank you very much. Goodbye.